a non-major or major comprehensive plan application?
I'd have to refer to the permit, which I'd like to do if we are going to, I'd like to look at the plan approval if we're going to go down this road.
You are welcome to do that. That is my last question on that topic.
Okay.
So this section continues on to explain that in order for the department to determine fact, the plan application must include, and then there's a list of 3 things. I'm going to paraphrase, but let me know if I'm being generally accurate. First, the top-down or case-by-case analysis of fact, or a top case fact, or a proposed cap on emissions. Is that correct?
Correct.
So in order for the Department of Environmental Protection to determine fact, an applicant can do one of those 3 things, correct?
That is correct.
And in this case, the applicant elected to conduct a top-down fact analysis, correct?
That is correct.
And that's the first bullet in this list of 3 options, correct?
It is.
Turning your attention to page 3 of this document. In the second paragraph, this explains that a top-down fact analysis includes an examination of the most stringent top case alternative, but it allows an applicant to eliminate the most stringent control alternative by demonstrating that it is not feasible for technical, energy, environmental, or economic reasons, correct?
That is correct.
And this is actually the language of the guidance that you were referring to definitely a few minutes ago as well, correct? In this case, the applicant did perform an economic analysis to determine the cost of installing SCR, is that correct?
Yes.
And turning to page 4 of the guidance, towards the second to last full paragraph on that page, it explains that economic feasibility is measured in terms of the annualized cost of a particular control technology or technique divided by the annual emissions reduction achieved by using it relative to baseline emissions. You see that?
I do. I also want to point out in the first paragraph, it defines what baseline emissions are. Essentially uncontrolled emissions calculated using realistic upper boundary operating assumptions.
Thank you. And with respect to that last paragraph, it continues on to explain that the annualized cost includes the capital cost of the control technology or technique amortized over its expected lifetime, plus annual operating and maintenance costs. You see that?
Yes.
Can you explain to us what that means?
Amortized capital cost, I know in the cost analysis that was done by the applicant, they assumed the capital cost of the SCR was amortized over 20 years at a 7% interest rate. So what that's doing is splitting that initial capital cost into 20 fixed payments over 20 years. Annual cost would be ammonia, for example, for the SCR reagent that is consumed during the year. It would be maintenance costs to replace odds and ends that would occur during the year, those types of things.
And the 2 annual costs that you just identified, ammonia and maintenance to replace odds and ends, those are things that are specific to SCR, correct?
The ammonia is specific to SCR as opposed to the oxidation catalyst, which does not require the injection of reagent. There will be maintenance on all of the hardware at the compressor station, the gas turbine, the oxidation catalyst, the SCR.
familiar with the applicant's economic feasibility calculations in the application?
Yes.
And is it fair to say that the applicant determined that SCR would cost over $40,000 a ton or per ton of NOx removed? Is that correct?
They did, and my position is they did the calculation incorrectly.
But that is your understanding of the applicant's correct calculation, yes?
That is correct.
And for the record, what does NOx mean?
NOx means nitrogen oxides.
Turning back to the DEP guidance, let's mark this exhibit number 2 on page 5. In the middle of the page, the guidance explains that there is an $11,000 to $13,000 per ton cost effectiveness range for non-attainment precursor pollutants such as nitrogen oxide, correct?
Correct.
What is a non-attainment precursor pollutant?
Non-attainment means that for these pollutants, at least at some point during the year, the concentrations are above the ambient air quality standard.
One of your critiques of the applicant's cost calculation is that you say some degree of inflation adjustment should be applied to DEP's cost feasibility range for non-attainment precursor pollutants like NOx. Is that correct?
That is correct.
This is in paragraph 51 of your testimony. Are you aware of any case in which the Mass Department of Environmental Protection has applied a inflation factor to those figures?
I'm not familiar with any case where it has been done, but to be fair, I'm not familiar with the cases. I do not know.
Did you offer testimony anywhere in your pre-filed written direct testimony concerning whether NOx control technology has become more or less expensive over the last decade?
No.
One of the other critiques of your critique of the applicant's cost calculation is set forth through paragraphs 54 to 57 of your testimony. Take a look at those. You claim that the applicant used an incorrect input for uncontrolled base case NOx emission rate for the turbine at issue. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What is an uncontrolled base case NOx emission rate?
Well, I do want to repeat what's in the Massachusetts DEP back guidelines, like I said earlier, which is page 4, baseline emissions for an analysis of this type, essentially uncontrolled emissions calculated using realistic upper boundary operating assumptions. The 9 ppm version of the Solo NOx system, and for the record, Solo NOx is a dry low NOx combustor technology that balances air and fuel to keep the NOx down. This came along in about the 1990s. Before that, turbines were injected with water to reduce NOx emissions and get more power. The witness Cushing with Mass DEP says that we should consider Solo NOx as the baseline. I agree 100%. But Solo NOx is not just one control level. The applicant put in back layer analysis, 2 pages of comparable installations in order to determine what back layer should be. Mr. Cushing said that 9 ppm is used in a vast number of these turbines. There are 9 Solo NOx entries in that back layer analysis. 6 of them are at 25 ppm. 1 is at 28.4 ppm. 2 of them are at 15 ppm. None of them are at 9 ppm. In this case, 25 ppm is the uncontrolled baseline. The 9 ppm unit To use an analogy with an SUV, 25 ppm is the basic model. 15 ppm is the next tick up. 9 ppm is the deluxe model. And that unit has been available. First time it started appearing in permits was 2014, 2015. First deployments are just happening. This is the state-of-the-art solar NOx unit. What was done in the application, what is known as an incremental back analysis, was not a baseline back analysis. I don't have a problem with doing an incremental back analysis, but that's all that was done. But in order to do an incremental analysis, you need to know how much more it costs to go from 25 ppm to 9 ppm. When you, in applications, other applications I've seen where they talk about how they've modified the combustion line, how they've doubled up on fuel delivery. And they've also added an oxidation catalyst. That is a precious metal catalyst. That costs money. We don't know from the application what it costs to go from 25 ppm to 9 ppm. So many things were left out of this application. But fundamentally, 25 ppm is and has been for years the base case assumption for solar NOx turbines.
Has it been the base case assumption for solar NOx turbines that match the unit that's at issue in this case and that were purchased with a 9 part per million warranty?
The second entry in that backed layer analysis in the applicant's application is a Taurus 60. It's the exact same unit as being proposed at Weymouth. It is permitted at 25 ppm using a solar NOx combustor.
The same one that's at issue in this case?
If you're asking me if it's the exact same turbine, it is not. It's the same make and model of turbine.
But it is a different turbine from the one that's being proposed in this case?
Are you being serious?
Yes.
Yes, it is a different turbine.
A different type of turbine?
No, this is a Taurus 60.
Sorry, go ahead.
Solar turbines Taurus 60.
Does it include the exact same technology as the turbine that's being proposed in this case?
Its permit limit is 25 ppm. It is not 9 ppm.
So it does not include the same technology that's being proposed in this case?
Apparently not.
Right. So in fact, it is a different turbine than the one that's being proposed in this
No,
case?
sir. It is the same turbine with a modified combustion system. In the business I'm in, if a turbine's got a make and a model, it's the same turbine,
Okay. Even if the guts are different?
even if there's a modification to the combustion chamber. That is correct.
Now, when you explained what Solenox is, you explained that it balances air and fuel to keep nitrogen oxide down. Is that correct?
Correct.
It does that as part of the combustion process, correct?
Correct.
It is not a post-combustion control, correct?
Correct.
Bertram, do you have a question?
Yes, just 1 second. We're trying to find a copy of the regulations. Is it correct that the solar Taurus 60 was proposed for the compressor station that issued in this case at a guaranteed NOx emission rate of 9 parts per million during steady state operation at 50 to 100% load for temperatures above zero? And if you could turn your attention back to page 4 of the mass back guideline, please.
I am there.
See immediately above the paragraph about economic feasibility that we looked at a moment ago, the paragraph that describes the EPA's New Source Review Workshop Manual.
I do.
And what is that?
That's a manual that was published in 1990 that provided information for permit writers, writing permits for major air permits, and it includes a chapter on industrial control technology, practices, and procedures.
And the Mass DEP's guidance, or the reference to the New Source Review Manual and Mass DEP's guidance suggests that that is a place that we could look to further understand how to perform that calculation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I'm going to interrupt you for a moment. The gentleman in the back holding up the sticker, either put the sticker on your shirt or put it down. Thank you. Sorry, thank you.
This is Dr. Mark, this is Exhibit 3.
Okay.
You recognize the document that's been marked as Exhibit number 3?
I do.
And is that the New Source, the EPA's New Source Review Workshop Manual that's referred to in the DEP's guidance that we just looked at a minute ago?
It is.
And calling your attention to page B37.
I am there.
There's a section in the middle of this page that's entitled Calculating Baseline Emissions. Do you see that?
I do.
And calling your attention to page B37. 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 And calling your attention to page B37.
Yes.
And towards the bottom, the second to last sentence in that paragraph reads, when calculating the cost effectiveness of adding post-process emissions controls to certain inherently lower polluting processes, baseline emissions may be assumed to be the emissions from the lower polluting process itself. See that?
I do.
What is meant by lower polluting processes?
We'll use this situation as an example. As I mentioned earlier, that until the 1990s, the way emissions were controlled on gas turbines of this type was to inject water. And Solenox just happens to be a trademark for Solar Turbines Inc.'s line of gas turbines. The bigger umbrella term is dry low NOx combustion technology, because it's expensive to be injecting all that water into a gas turbine. Manufacturers develop dry low NOx combustion technology. Dry low NOx technology, typically the base form of dry low NOx combustion technology has an emission limit of 25 ppm. So dry low NOx combustion technology, in this case Solenox, is inherently lower technology. However, there are base case, advanced, and deluxe versions of Solenox.
And a Solenox technology that is warranted to the 9 part per million limitation, like the one at issue in this case, is an inherently lower polluting process than the technology that limited emissions to 25 parts per million, correct?
Solenox as a class is a inherently lower emission technology. 9 ppm Solenox is a top-of-the-line deluxe version of Solenox technology. It is not the baseline of Solenox technology.
But you agree with me that Solenox is not a post-process emission control, correct?
I do.
Because as that phrase is used in this language, the process that's being referred to is the combustion process, correct?
I'm going to amend my comment there, because talking about the deluxe nature of 9 ppm Solenox, the 25 ppm base case, the 15 ppm advanced case does not include an oxidation catalyst. So there is a post-combustion technology on the 9 ppm unit. However, that post-combustion technology is not there to reduce NOx. The problem with this deluxe 9 ppm system is they have leaned out that air-fuel ratio so much that they get high levels of CO and volatile organics. They have to put an oxidation catalyst on the back end to deal with the problem of reducing that oxygen so much, which is you get more CO and you get more VOC. So this is somewhat of a hybrid. There is a back-end control technology on this unit, even though it's a NOx control system, because of the downside of how they're trying to control NOx.
But the Solenox technology is not the post-process control technology.
But it inherently includes an oxidation catalyst downstream. So they are part and parcel. You cannot separate the two.
But they are separate devices and technologies, correct?
True, but they are part of the 9 ppm Solenox.
We move on to paragraph 48 of your testimony, please.
I am there.
In this part of your testimony, you identify 4 combined heat and power, or CHP, facilities in Massachusetts that use torus gas turbines equipped with SCR. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What is a combined heat and power facility?
A combined heat and power facility is a facility that generates electricity and generates heat in the form of steam.
And there are differences between a combined heat and power facility and a natural gas compressor, correct?
Correct.
Is one that a gas compressor station will burn only natural gas?
These CHP plants are natural gas burning plants that use oil as a backup fuel. So they are also predominantly or exclusively natural gas, but they have the ability to burn oil as a backup fuel.
So each of the 4 CHP units that you referenced in this paragraph are what is known as dual fuel, in that they can fire both natural gas and distillate oil. Is that correct?
Correct.
Why would a CHP facility need 2 types of fuel?
If there was any type of natural gas interruption, they could still provide power and steam.
Is it true that the combustion of distillate oil creates significantly more nitrogen oxide than combustion of an equivalent amount of natural gas?
In the combustion chamber?
Yes.
Yes.
Do the CHP units that you referenced in your testimony include duct burners?
I'd have to review the permits to see if they all do, but I know that some do.
The duct burner is a separate source of nitrogen oxide emissions, correct?
That is correct.
Is it true that in a general sense there are significantly more nitrogen oxide emissions from a combined heating and power facility than from a compressor turbine?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Do the CHP units at issue or that are described in your testimony create significantly more nitrogen oxide emissions from combustion than the gas compressor that's been proposed for Weymouth?
None of these units, as far as I'm aware, are using 9 ppm solo NOx on their turbines. So they're not using 9 ppm, then their NOx emissions out of the combustion chamber will be higher than they would be otherwise.
And then the duct burner, for example, would increase or add additional NOx emissions, correct?
If it's in use, duct burners are generally not used that often either.
What is your basis for saying that?
Having worked around power plants for 30 years.
Why did they happen?
Peaking power, when you are, have high demand and you want to extend that output, fire the duct burners to generate more steam in the steam turbine.
So you're not saying they're not used, they're just not used as frequently as the regular turbine itself?
Correct.
Do the facts that the CHP facilities that you looked at do not have the 9 parts per million warranty, and that some of them at least have duct burners, impact the cost analysis that's relative to back?
Yes, but in the same way that I was just explaining, that if your inlet emissions to the SCR are higher, then you're going to control more NOx, and your cost effectiveness value is going to be lower. The same analogy with if you're going into the SCR at 9 ppm, I think you mentioned $41,000. If you're coming into that SCR at 25 ppm, it's $13,000 or $14,000. Just the cost effectiveness is changed by using whatever the appropriate inlet concentration should be.
In paragraph 59 of your testimony, you state that SCR can be operated remotely at unmanned compressor stations using something called supervisory control and data acquisition technology. Is that right? And what do you mean by unmanned?
Unmanned means there's no one at the site on a daily basis. There's a control center at some remote location. They're monitoring all of the functions of the various devices, the compressor station from afar, and that's what I mean.
You'd agree with me that even an unmanned compressor station requires a human presence on a routine basis, correct?
On occasion.
You're not saying that unmanned facilities require no maintenance activities, are you?
Application says there's going to be 1,100 hours of operations and maintenance labor at this site for this SCR. I wouldn't contest someone saying that there may be 20 or 30 hours of periodic labor associated with the SCR during the year, but that's a tiny fraction of what's included in the application.
So you agree that there will be maintenance associated with SCR, but not with the numbers that the applicant included in its cost calculation?
Well, this is an important point. The applicant includes 1,100 hours a year of operations and maintenance labor. I'm not contesting that there might be 20 or 30. In fact, 20 or 30 hours a year, there is in one of the, it might be Mr. Goodrich, he lists a number of things like taking samples from the catalyst. I don't disagree that that might happen every couple of years, and it might take a few hours to get in and get a sample, but it has, it is de minimis relative to the hours that are included in the application.
In paragraph 61 of your testimony, you say that there is no basis to include any dedicated SCR labor costs in the cost effectiveness calculations. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by it is in the application, the couple of things. The applicant has included about $16,000 or $17,000 for operating labor, and the applicant cites to a particular EPA control cost manual called the 6th edition. That is the only EPA cost control manual that the applicant cites to, is the 6th edition. And the 6th edition is explicit, is that you do not include any operating labor for the SCR. I think Mr. Goodrich in his testimony introduces the next edition, the 7th edition, which has some confusing information in it on that issue. But the application only refers to the 6th edition. It's just no operating labor. So the 16.5 for operating labor, gone. Next issue is maintenance labor. The other, I cite to 3 compressor stations using Taurus turbines that are equipped with SCR, determined with SCR, West Virginia, Virginia, North Carolina. They are explicitly being operated remotely. There is nobody on the site. There is no way you can have a maintenance man every 8 hours spending a half hour of their time doing anything on the site, because they're not there. I don't contest that once in a great while someone will come and take a coupon from the catalyst to check and see how it's doing. But this is, we're talking tens of hours a year, not over 1,000.
With respect to the 3 stations that you just referenced that are operated remotely, have you done something to determine how much maintenance the SCR system will require on an annual basis?
I think I mentioned earlier that I permitted a half a dozen solar turbines installations. Every one of them is equipped with an SCR, and I feel fairly expert on what it takes to maintain an SCR. The items that are listed here, as the EPA correctly says, and I think I don't have Mr. Goodrich's testimony here, but he quotes to the sense saying, there's nothing to do. There are no moving parts. It is operating on natural gas, the cleanest fossil fuel you can use. There is nothing to do. And you need to periodically check that the catalyst, which is usually guaranteed for at least 5 or 6 years on a natural gas installation, is going to make it for its 5 or 6 year guarantee. That is in terms of time, very little time required to do that. And so the EPA gets it right. There's nothing to do. I have one other comment since I'm on this monologue. The 9 ppm unit includes a catalyst. there's an oxidation catalyst on this 9 ppm unit. Whoever is working on the oxidation catalyst, they may be coming around for tens of hours a year, is just as capable of moving 1 foot to the left or right to check or take a coupon from the SCR catalyst. So you've already got maintenance, if it's periodic, maintenance associated with the 9 ppm oxidation catalyst. If you instead go to a 25 ppm Solenox unit and have no oxidation catalyst, the person who was going to work on the oxidation catalyst periodically is now going to work on the SCR catalyst, but you can't count that SCR as an extra cost for that extra maintenance. You already had a maintenance fellow who's going to come by once in a while to look at the oxidation catalyst. It's gone, you get another catalyst, but that's in your base case.
So the time that the maintenance fellow spends working or maintaining the SCR system is something that you think shouldn't be factored into the cost calculation, right?
I have no problem including 20 or 30 hours of time per year instead of 1,100.
And you have experience operating SCR systems?
I have experience specifying, not operating.
You don't actually have any experience with what it takes to operate the actual operations of an SCR system?
As part of specifying them, I'm very familiar with the operations and maintenance requirements of those units.
But you have not actually been involved in the operating side of the business, is that correct?
I mean, have I been the fellow who goes in and cleans the nozzle on the SCR ammonia injection system?
Have you been that fellow?
I have not been that fellow.
Have you been responsible for hiring that fellow?
I have not.
Have you been responsible working for the owner of a turbine to determine how often he needs to have that fellow on site?
I have been hired by developers to permit gas turbines in simple cycle configuration like this one. And that includes reviewing the operations and maintenance requirements for the SCR.
But post-permitting operations are something you're not involved in, correct?
I'm not trying to be difficult, but I ran a test team for 10 years and we test those turbines to see how they're doing, which include SCR catalysts.
Did you charge for those services?
Yes.
How much?
Well, that was in the 1990s. I think I was the head of a source testing team. I think I was getting paid about $50,000 a year at the time. And whatever I billed out at the time, which I don't recall, is what I got paid.
And are those type of services built into the 20 to 30 hours that you're estimating for the maintenance of SCR in this case?
No, that's an operations and maintenance expense that is going to be true of any turbine. You're going to have to hire a test team, whether it's Solenox at 9 ppm or whether it's SCR at the back end. There will be, in this plan approval that you handed me earlier, there's going to be test requirements. It doesn't matter whether it's 9 ppm or SCR.
And are you familiar with Enbridge's experience in maintaining SCR systems and similar turbines?
Whose experience?
Enbridge.
I'm familiar with the testimony that Mr. Goodrich gave on that.
Have you done any sort of analysis to determine how much money Enbridge spends with respect to maintaining its SCR systems in similar turbines?
I must say I'm impressed that Enbridge is still operating turbines that are over 30 years old in the field. I'm not surprised that their maintenance costs may be a little higher, but he was referring to turbines that are at least 30 years old.
But so you have not done any sort of analysis or investigation to determine what maintenance costs Enbridge incurs with respect to maintaining its SCR systems, correct?
No, but I repeat, the reference that Mr. Goodrich gave was unapplicable to this situation. He was talking about turbines that have been in the field for decades.
And the SCR systems of those are drastically different from the SCR systems proposed in this case, correct?
SCRs are usually guaranteed at most on gas for 5 or 6 years. He's talking about turbines that have been around for over 30 years. I do not know what Enbridge is doing at this point. They would have had to replace that catalyst multiple times, and I'm impressed that they're still operational.
Do you know that the SCR systems in the turbines that you're talking about are 20 to 30 years old?
I'm saying they can't be.
Okay.
They've been replaced multiple times. I'm saying this is an old, he's talking about old systems, and frankly, SCR systems for these types of units started to be deployed in the 1990s. So my guess is, based on his comment, he's talking about serial number 1 SCRs in these applications. is not comparable to a current unit.
But you just described that as a guess, correct?
That is correct.
You referenced two different versions of an EPA air pollution cost control manual, is that correct?
Correct.
And you said that you looked at the 6th edition and didn't find any cost estimation or manual or labor time estimation with respect to SCR, correct?
That is correct, but I do want to repeat, that's true of the applicant as well. They only use the 6th edition in the application.
But you were aware of the notion that there is a more recent edition, correct?
Correct.
And in that edition, you were saying that the EPA does estimate operating labor time, daily operation labor time associated with SCR, correct?
I wouldn't give them that much credit. They use the exact same sentence to say why there is no operating labor, and then they throw in a sentence without commenting on it or any analysis, just saying from this other document we have, they say 4 hours. And so they use the same logic for having no operating labor, and then they just put in almost a non sequitur sentence. So I would say it's just confusing what they have in the 7th edition. Let's take a look.
Mark that as our next. Good.
Thank you.
It's number 4. Yep.
Recognize what's been marked as number 4, Mr. Powers?
I do.
I just want to direct you to page 2 dash, I'm sorry, what is it?
This is, though it doesn't say it on the title here, this is the chapter in the EPA's Air Pollution Control Cost Manual, 7th edition, chapter on selective catalytic reduction.
This is the document that you were just talking about a moment ago, correct?
Correct.
And with respect to page 273,
I'm there.
paragraph operating and supervisory labor,
Yes.
and it says in general, operation of an SCR system requires only minimal operating or supervisory labor. See that?
I do.
And then it continues on at the end of that paragraph, I think is the language that you were referring to, that says the IPM estimates operating labor time is 4 hours a day, correct?
Correct.
What is the IPM?
It's a kind of a generic EPA study on costs.
And so what the EPA has said in its most recent chapter of the Air Pollution Cost Control Manual is that it estimates labor time for SCR systems using a 4-hour day calculation, correct?
Yeah, let me make a couple of comments on this. Number one, the EPA Air Pollution Control Cost Manual, and I think it says it up front, was developed for boilers over 250 MMBTU. So it's a different class of device than the SCR. But number two, these first two sentences, operating and supervisory labor. In general, operation of an SCR system requires only minimal operating or supervisory labor. The SCR reactor is a stationary device with no moving parts. Further, the SCR system incorporates only a few pieces of rotating equipment, pumps and motors. Well, in 2002, they used the identical language to say that there's no operating labor associated with the SCR. In 2017, they add a sentence with no comment from another document. Estimates operating labor time is 4 hours per day. So, two things. One, it's just not coherent if you would use the exact same language in 2002 and 2017 and throw in a sentence with no explanation that says that. But let's step back for a minute. This was developed for boilers over 250 million MMBtu per hour. We're dealing with a Tara 60 gas turbine, which has a heat input of 69 million BTUs per hour. This is a global generic document. in my testimony, I referred to 3 compressor stations using the same turbine with SCR and unmanned remote control. The actual operating conditions of a comparable or nearly identical facility trumps a generic document designed for boilers that are many times larger than this, and includes language that is contradictory. 2002, this is the basis for having no operating labor. In 2017, same language, and then a sentence without explanation that refers to another document, which in fact is dealing with large utility scale boilers, where in their case, it's either above 300 megawatts or it's below. This turbine is 5.7 megawatts.
So, but you don't know why the EPA now includes this estimate of 4 hours a day in the cost manual, correct?
I don't know, and I don't think it matters, because we're using specific examples from operating compressor stations using the same technology with SCR for operating unmanned. That is the determining.
But with respect to those unmanned facilities, you don't actually know how much labor they're spending on maintaining their SCR systems, do you?
I think I just gave you some estimates of what that is.
Did you know that from looking at those specific applications?
No, I'm not talking about what they're estimating in terms of going in and cutting coupons. I'm giving my professional estimate of what that is.
Yeah, so you don't know what's happening at the facilities that you cited in your testimony, correct?
Well, those facilities are not operational yet, but in my professional opinion, we're talking about on the order of 20 or 30 hours a year to do the activities that are, and Mr. Goodrich is not wrong, these activities do occur on a periodic basis, but the amount of time required to do them is de minimis relative to the hours that are included in this application.
In paragraph 19 of your testimony, you opined that an electric motor alternative to the proposed Taurus gas turbine is economically feasible. Is that right?
Just give me 1 moment to get there. What paragraph are you at?
19?
Yes. And in paragraph 24, you state that electric motors and natural gas-fired combustion turbines have approximately the same installed cost. Is that correct? That is correct.
And the authority that you cited for that is an Hingham article. Is that correct?
Well, it's a paper. It's a paper article.
What is Hingham?
Interstate Natural Gas Association.
To save the paper, just pulled a selection of the paper that I wanted to ask you a question about, but you recognize the cover of this. This is the paper that you referenced in your testimony, yes?
That is correct.
And on page 35.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Not there yet. Okay, go ahead.
Do you see that it says, first full sentence, the availability and proximity of a suitable electric power supply or substation is also an issue because it can be costly to install a new interconnecting electric power transmission line, and it may be difficult to obtain the necessary regulatory approvals. See that?
I do.
You don't have any reason to disagree with that statement, do you?
It's a very broad stroke, so no.
And have you reviewed the FRRACS environmental assessment that was prepared in connection with the Atlantic Bridge project?
I have.
And are you familiar with the infrastructure that the FERC staff found would be necessarily associated with an electric motor option in this project?
I'm familiar with the infrastructure that they looked at as part of their analysis.
And that included laying a half a mile of electric transmission line, correct?
That is the only alternative that they addressed. That's correct.
It also looked at construction of a new substation, correct?
Yes.
and upgrading an existing electrical substation, correct?
Those are among the list of items that they included, that is correct.
Okay. And when you say that electric motors and natural gas-fired combustion turbines have the same costs, you're not accounting for the additional infrastructure that might be necessary for an electric option in this case, correct?
In that specific statement paragraph, I'm talking about the gas turbine itself compared to the electric motor alternative, and not including
Infrastructure.
well, not including an underground connection to the closest substation. Though I have a comment to make on that, which is you refer to these FRRACS studies, and I think both witnesses, Cushing and Walsh, include the entirety of the narrative in those studies, maybe 3 paragraphs in the EA, 3 paragraphs in the resource assessment. And no one did any study of alternatives to what is presented. No one corroborated the numbers that are included in testimony on Mr. Welsh's testimony. So they've thrown out one scenario, and they've not done anything like interconnection analysis that includes multiple scenarios. So I want to make clear that there's been no vetting at all of the numbers that they put in. I will admit that you have to connect your electric motor to a power supply.
And you haven't analyzed the costs of infrastructure that would be associated with that, correct?
And neither is the applicant,
In your opinion, correct?
in my opinion.
With respect to reliability of the electric power grid, you testified that Greater Boston has not experienced a major blackout in the 21st century. Is that correct?
Correct.
That doesn't mean that Weymouth has not experienced power outages during that time, correct?
I was looking at major outages and didn't specifically look to see if Weymouth had experienced in that part of town outages.
You don't know. That's possible, correct?
It's possible.
And if you look back at the Ginga paper that you referenced, also on page 35, the sentence immediately following the one that we looked at explains that reliability of the electric power transmission grid, overhead transmission lines are susceptible to damage in severe weather conditions, availability and cost of power from the local distribution company, and the obligation to pay electric demand charges even when the unit is not running are additional factors when considering installation of an electric motor. See that?
I do.
And you don't have any reason to disagree with that, do you?
No, but the gas turbine is going to be unavailable on a routine basis as well. So there's no advantage to a gas turbine in terms of reliability.
When you say routine basis, do you mean for scheduled maintenance?
And unplanned maintenance. And I think on the order of a couple of % of the time of the year, there will be forced outages. Meaning you're in a forced outage, you have overheating bearings, you've thrown a blade in the turbine. It doesn't matter if you have a pony motor to start it. There's nothing to start. It's not working.
With respect to comparative noise, you haven't done any actual analysis to evaluate the predicted noise levels associated with the Weymouth gas-fired turbine and comparable electric motor option, have you?
No.
Thank you very much, Mr. Powers. I have no further questions. Oh, I'm sorry. For the record, I apologize for not doing this earlier, but I'd like to move to admit the exhibits that we marked through the end.
Any objection?
No.
Further admitted as exhibits? The department, any cross-examination of Mr. Powers?
Yes, thank you, Officer Rothschild. Mr. Powers, for the record, my name is MacDara Fallon. I represent Mass DEP. I just have a couple of follow-up questions for you. I'm trying not to be duplicative of all the answers we gave you. And thank you for your testimony, by the way. The department appreciates the information you gave us, and we reviewed it. I do want to ask you a couple of questions on your pre-file direct testimony, if you don't mind. So if you turn to paragraph 61 on page 17. And sir, in paragraph 61, you state in the first sentence, the only unique SCR parameter that requires monitoring is the ammonia reagent injection rate, correct?
Correct.
So, sir, so the question is going to be related to the ammonia. So is that ammonia something that would have to be stored on site in Weymouth if this system were to be used?
Correct.
And how would it be stored on site? Where would it be stored?
In a tank at the discretion of the owner.
And how large of a tank?
Depends on how frequently they want to refill it.
And what would be your recommendation on the size of a tank if this system were to go in?
Probably a few thousand gallons.
A few thousand gallons? And just in your opinion, sir, is ammonia a material that needs special care? Is it something that you would consider to be a dangerous material, in your opinion?
Ammonia can be used in an SCR in a couple of forms. One is anhydrous, which is considered somewhat hazardous to store. The other is aqueous, which is primarily water with some ammonia in it. And that would be the preferred
Preferred.
form of ammonia, yes.
Which one do you recommend in your pre-filed record? Do you reference that?
I don't.
You don't.
But I would recommend aqueous ammonia.
So, just to be clear, where does the ammonia in this process go, in this reagent injection? Where does it go?
It gets converted when it interacts with NOx on the catalyst and basically is broken down into molecular nitrogen and water vapor.
Would there be any emissions of ammonia as a result of this process from the facility?
I'm glad you brought that up. There is going to be some amount of ammonia that slips through the catalyst. And I think in Mr. Cushing's testimony, he refers to an example that's used in the back guidelines to seemingly make the point that it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another because of ammonia slip. But ammonia slip in a gas turbine shouldn't be more than at max 1 or 2 ppm. So there is some, but it is in that range.
1 or 2 ppm.
Correct.
And sir, would the storage of ammonia on the site require any additional personnel to be on the site?
No.
You would not. Oh, and sorry, just on cross-examination, you were discussing the alternative of having an electric motor in place of a natural gas-powered motor. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And I just wasn't clear, is it your testimony that electric motor would not require any backup motors?
That is correct.
And would that be an industry standard, something that you would recommend to clients not to have backup motors for an electric motor in this type of turbine system?
No, there is no need for backup.
No need for backup.
It presumes that you have a reliable electric grid. That's what we were just discussing.
Right, right. So your professional judgment, they don't need to have any kind of backup motors if it were an electrical.
The industry has deployed many, many electric motors in these compressor applications, and they do not use backup motors.
And one last question concerning the option of an electrical motor. Do you view that as being the same project that's being proposed to the department if they switch to an electric motor, or is that something that the department should consider as a redesign of the project, or something that would go beyond the scope of the original project that was proposed to us? If we go from go from natural gas power to electric.
No, I don't consider it a redesign of the project. I know the department, or Mr. Cushing uses the example of someone, which is straight out of the NSR manual, someone trying to build a coal-fired power plant, and instead the department requires that they evaluate a gas-fired combined cycle plant, for example. That is not the situation. In this situation, the objective is to compress natural gas. You can do it with a gas turbine, you can do it with an electric motor. The industry routinely does it with an electric motor. Their choice. There's actually no need for a department if this is completely left to the industry. And at times they'll go with an electric motor or they'll go with a gas turbine based on their choice.
But, so your professional opinion is they're the same thing? An electric motor is the same thing as a natural gas powered?
My professional opinion is not that they're the same thing.
Okay.
My professional opinion is the electric motor eliminates air emissions. It eliminates air permits.
Right.
It is actually the ideal thing to put in from an air quality standpoint, and the department has the authority to look at it.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your testimony. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bertram, Mr. Miyares? Need redirect?
If we could have a short break.
Maybe take a 10-minute break. We will reconvene at 10:45.
I know the feeling.
No, I just told her.
On Friday.
I was told, running late. It was actually me asking because
I don't have a flight till Saturday morning just for that.
Go ahead, sir.
There's something down there. I think in the leaf. So pull that out.
This is
Sandy it's just
Shut us down.
I'm just wondering if the documents just trying to follow the
They
process.
probably are available online. I personally don't know how to access that. They're public documents, you get copies of them, but I think if you hear, particularly EPA documents, you go to the EPA website, they should come up on the Google. I think even Google should come up.
Well, I do, but I couldn't see any from EPA.
Yeah.
So, just federal EPA website?
Yes, they should be. That's what I would look. We'll go to the EPA website. But they're all public. They're all public.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe there's a few.
something over this Yeah, but we're not really.
Found two more.
Well, she had a couple, I know.
Most of the time, that's
I got a 7 more coming.
Good, good, thanks.
lot of this is all and they call it right, and basically it's a heat island, luxury of alpine stack. They invented this because they something in the building, and then they something around 1500 Fahrenheit, wall separated, gizmo, and then a little off from the stacks. So those were not Michigan to see the actual analysis, but basically they estimate all the things like that. So yeah, version and they do a lot of that. There's a lot of automatic systems that realize all compressor stations. In other words, the fittings going from the pipeline into the compressor pipeline with the tank. So they all have wire rings for their own, and they have a automatic drain. What happened there was that was invented every night. Which is fine, except no one anywhere because it was well, they don't. I don't guess I'm going to give it a because it shows the last
Yeah, town meeting Monday night.
yeah, that's what it says. They're still arguing about whether or not they're going to go forward.
Well, Saturday's there.
Yeah,
It's
right.
over.
Yeah, right.
No, I mean, my husband's doing it. Yeah.
It's
It's a long story. It's a long story. Excuse me.
I'm panning. This is Margaret of FRRACS, criminal of WGB. I was panning. Well, I'm getting some people like that. Okay, so. That's going to be CC stuff. There's so many cars on that street, I can't get it. Some people I know and I'm going to read the roads, I don't know. We've read through it Thursday.
Hopefully, figure it out.
Yes, that's why I wanted to let you know that I had to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Appreciate you being here. Do you want a night bar? Sound like anybody want to Oh shoot! Well, I was gonna get you donuts. Yeah, it's there.
So I think
I got that from That's mine. Well, I have multiple, yeah, I have every part of I've got it belongs to
Yeah. Yeah, I don't mind it. I like it.
I saw the notebook, I was like, oh, hi, hello. Yeah, so. No worries. I know, nobody can hear. Yeah. And then you can sign.
Hi, Rob.
Okay, I just wanted to say hello and thank you for all the work on this honor. Thank you so much for all the work on me.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Not the microphone. I can make out when you say it, but I What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask whether I want to stand.
Yes, I do.
Voice is much less like Rob. Speaking to the room. I would encourage that as well, because you're also more likely to definitely back your hearing for conversation.
Yes, I saw that.
So, Frank, I'm gonna call Alice first just to get her up and down. And Kurt. I would pick up Mark. Go ahead, talk away. But you guys had given any thought to that? Wasn't you guys about the audit of the audit findings?
Yeah, I thought that
Is everybody ready to go back to break?
We break for lunch.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, right?
you know what it's error, you think discussion. That's why I'm raising it now. Time is short.
Oh, really?
Can I have your attention, please?
I introduced
On the
myself.
process of getting your microphone set up.
He asked me what I did.
Please.
When I told him,
May I have your attention? We're in the process of getting a microphone set up on the witness stand. The only person who will be, there's only one microphone. So the only amplification is going to be of the witness. So I will remind the attorneys to please keep your voices up. And if after the microphone is set up, and we're working to get it set up on a stand, so that Mr. Powers and the witnesses who testify subsequently don't have to hold it, show. If in the back, after the microphone is set up, you still can't hear, please let me know by raising your hand high, and I will see what can be done to address it. So it's going to be a few minutes before that. So we'll continue the work.
Madam Hearing Officer, if I can ask, is this microphone that's behind us here active? It's just
I don't know what you're referring to.
There's a microphone attached to a camera.
Looks like it's a media.
Media.
It's not.
It's not active?
No, the microphone is active.
Yes.
And it goes with the video.
Just that if I am having conversations with my client, I didn't know I had a microphone behind me.
I don't know that it's that great. It's a borrowed camera, so I don't know.
But
Nick, out of curiosity, when you circulated counsel for how many do you have to 15? Thank you.
Assistant commissioners have many duties.
it has been
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you so much.
How about that rack over there? Do you need that little silver rack?
It's not mine.
You got everything? Of course.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It was also
Hot and wet. This is good. What's this? Austerity. Citizen. Yes, austerity.
Wait a minute.
That's not it.
I'm familiar with it because I studied the work.
At right there, I don't know if it always seemed like, I don't know that I want this. This is my There's another. We were driving down.
Sign says that I should be.
So the witnesses for this hearing.
Can you hear me in the back? Can you hear me in the back?
Yeah. Yes.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Thank you.
No.
Thank you.
No? Very 21st century. Ready to resume? I'll remind everyone, please keep your voices up. What we've learned through the testing of the microphone is you have to be very close to it. The witnesses will do their best to make sure. Again, in the back, if you can't hear, please raise your hand high so I can hear you. You can't hear me?
No.
Nope. But you heard me say that. Okay, so I will do my best. I'm practically shouting, so if we're doing the best we can. Okay, so everybody, do your best to keep your voices up so that the people in the back who are here and interested in this matter can hear everything that's transpiring in the room. Thank you. Mr. Miyares.
Thank you. Mr. Powers, could you turn to page 13 of your pre-filed testimony?
Yes.
And at the top of that is table 2. You were asking questions about cross.
Yes.
Okay. In particular, you were asked whether the SCR technology has, to your knowledge, been applied anywhere in the past. Do you recall that?
I do.
Are you aware of instances where the SCR technology has been applied elsewhere?
Yes.
Can you tell us about those?
Yes. In my testimony, I identify 3 compressor stations permitted in West Virginia, Virginia, and North Carolina that use the same turbine equipped with SCR. I did review the Virginia, one of these compressor stations is called the Buchanan Compressor Station in Virginia. I did read the permit engineering report on it, and they also referred to a similar compressor station in Baltimore County, Maryland, that they use to set the NOx limit on the SCR in their application. I should say in that engineering report, they explicitly identified SCR as backed.
If you're going to hold the microphone, you don't have to hold the cup.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Okay, you were also asking questions about your familiarity with Enbridge's costs associated with the operation of SCR. Do you know that?
Yes.
Do you have any reason to believe that Enbridge would have costs that are wildly different from other station operators?
No.
All right, the last thing I'm going to ask you is about this document, exhibit number 5, that the Dingle report.
Yes.
Is that one of the documents that you included in your pre-file direct testimony?
Yes.
Okay, so on page, you asked to look at page 35, and you were asked to look at a paragraph that is cut off from the previous page. Do you recall that?
I do.
Okay. Could you, you have a copy of the full document in front of you?
I do.
Okay. You have, are you able to read the beginning of that paragraph into the record?
Yes.
Okay. Just maybe the first few sentences.
So that paragraph begins, electric motors, : electric motors are more reliable and more efficient standalone pieces of equipment than either reciprocating engines or gas turbines. They are able to ramp up quicker than reciprocating engines or gas turbines. They also have an advantage where air quality regulations are an issue because they do not emit NOx and CO2 at the point of use. Thank you.
Mr. Cramb, do you have any remarks?
Just very quickly, with respect to the SCR that you said has been permitted in Virginia, West Virginia, and North Carolina,
Yes.
is that right? Do those states have the same top-down, backed cost feasibility range as Massachusetts?
I do not know.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. You will remain under oath if for some reason, I understand you're leaving to go back elsewhere. You're not going to be here through the week, is that correct?
I will be here tomorrow.
You will be here tomorrow, but not on Friday. Okay, so you will remain under oath in the event that you need to